Hey everybody, it's Mountain Mike. Thanks for checking in on me out on the mountain. Today's a continuation of all my Norwood videos, so let's just get to it. So I think with the instructions on the engine installation, it's pretty much you figured out. So we've got the Honda GX390, little 13 horse, and I'm anxious to unbox this motor. I'm really ready to see this thing, so let's go ahead and unbox it. Okay, so it calls for bag 9. Here are the contents laid out. Now, I don't know, maybe I'm just a stickler for detail, but you can see in the exploded view, it does not show you on the plate the actual mounting holes because they differ, I'm guessing, from model to model, but I'm pretty sure we're going to use these. Let's find out. Let's set this motor on here. So the first thing I did was get the nuts and bolts out of package 9. And the second thing is lower the deck all the way down. Let's get that motor on. Then we're just going to take the nuts and finger tight them on because we have to adjust the motor in a little bit. Now I suggest you do that before you start bolting your motor down. This upright right here is in the way. So naturally, the first thing I do is drop the wing nut to the air filter down behind this case. Okay, after that little detour, the next step is to take your air filter off without losing the wing nut down into the case. And again, in true Norwood fashion, it did not tell you, but you get your throttle cable out of bag 14. So you have to make a lot of assumptions here. I wanted to talk about the next step was installing the throttle cable. After looking through this, it doesn't give you a way to route the throttle cable, and I'm trying to figure this out. So you put your engine oil in and you adjust the throttle cable. It's like, what the heck, you know? So after flipping through all these pages from D5 to D29, we get back to the throttle cable. So it goes on to give you a little bit of routing instructions then finally. My point being here is that I would just go ahead and wait to do the throttle cable. I would not go ahead and do the throttle cable right now. It's just going to be in your way. So the next step is really going into installing the band guards, and we're just going to go ahead and go do that and then come back and route our throttle cable. So all the directions I've ever read in my life, you know, I understand evidently it's really hard for companies to do because getting really good accurate directions is really few and far between, you know. And I gotta say, Norwood, we gotta talk. Norwood, we need to talk about these directions. I mean, seriously, come on now. That's the good thing about having somebody do the project before you, is that you get to see all the fumbles and stumbles that are ahead. And maybe you get to avoid those time-consuming things. Okay, moving on. Guard, rubber latch assembly and guard installation. Easy enough. Bag number 10. The rest of box number 11. So I believe we are going to install these about here. So let's get to it. So I further wanted to point out, to add to the confusion, because I wasn't able to finish out my water tank with the on-off valve because of the lack of instructions and lack of parts. So when I'm dumping out bag 10, lo and behold, I believe that's the part I need to install that. So if that's the case, that's great, but again, I'm confused. Alright, so all rubber guard latches installed, top and bottom. Now they show, and they have 7 holes, but they only provide 6 latches. So you might want to just skip that middle one. best I can tell. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is install these blade guards onto the bracket. Alright, now the next step, once you have your guards mounted, is to square them up to each other and put a bolt or two in the middle. It's unclear, it only shows one bolt in the exploded view, so that's all we're going to put there for now. I'm pretty sure you're going to need both bolts. Alright, so once you get the guards all lined up and the bolts in the middle there tightened up, then you go ahead and go back and tighten the rest of the bolts. Now the adjustable blade guide handle bracket, like so. Hello, Blue. Alright, so the next section is the idler pulley, which you see laid out here before you. We're going to assemble these parts. So now that we've assembled the pieces to the idler pulley finger tight, it tells you to go ahead and tighten this down, but it seems to me that if you put it in place then tighten the big bolt down, you'll have a lot easier time. So we're going to do it that way. Okay, so this is supposed to be finger tight for now, but we locked those two bolts in place so we can tighten this down. So now we got all that tightened down. The next step is the bandwheel and bandwheel assembly adjustment. We're too late in the day to get started on that. Now I'm going to have to tarp everything and get ready for this storm coming, so we're going to get our first real rain on this brand new structure, so I'm going to try to wrap it up tight the best I can so it doesn't get any rain on it. We definitely want to protect our carriage. The carriage is not meant to be outside. Hopefully the storm will move out through the night and we can get started back in the morning, so meet you here. Hey everybody, we're back at it this morning. Had us a little storm blow through last night, so we've got the sawmill all covered up. So we've been working our way through section D of the instruction manual, and that's the engine installation and bandwheel assembly. Now we're to the bandwheel assembly and adjustment. We're almost there now, so let's go ahead and get to it and finish out section D. Alright, so the first thing that we want to do this morning is remove this shoulder bolt, taking off the locking nut, and we've done that. So out of box 1A you pull one of these out and it's an idler bandwheel shaft, and then you go to the front here and you insert it like so. So now we have the idler in place, the shoulder bolt in place, and we're going to put the locking nut back on it, and we're going to make sure we don't over tighten this to compress the blade tension adjuster, which is inside there. It needs to slide freely. That's what this adjustment's for. Alright, so in box 12 we have the band wheels, and we're going to install out of box 1 the band wheel belt onto one of them, and that'll be the idler band wheel. With the aid of a couple of screwdrivers, we're going to go ahead and install that. So let's do that. Okay, so we got the belt installed on it. She just fought a little bit, it wasn't too bad. Now the next thing to do is install it on the sawmill, and I want to point out that that flare out right there is considered the hub, and we're going to face that towards the sawmill when we install this. So let's go ahead and do that. Now out of bag 8, brass thrust washer. And then next after that, a split collar. So once you get it all installed like this, out of bag 8, you take your grease zerk. We're going to install that right, yeah. So the next thing we'll do is install the drive side. And it's essentially the same thing. The only difference is that you get a shoulder bolt out of bag 7 and it tells you bag 5, but it's the last remaining shoulder bolt, and it goes in the hole right here. The exploded diagram does not show you at all where this is supposed to go. You just, you got to use your common sense a lot here. And now greasing both. Alright, so the next step is to install the centrifugal clutch, which is in box 15A. and they tell you box 14. Bag 14, they got that right. So the first thing you'll do is remove your woodruff key off your engine shaft. Now, once you've greased your shaft, get in this bag 14 nut and bolt bag, and we get our washer and bolt out. They also supply you with a split color and another woodruff key, which our Honda motor already came with one, so we'll use that. So now the next thing to do is take your split collar and put that on. So once you've got your shaft grease, don't say it, your split collar on, now it's time to put the clutch on. And this is why I'm here to help you. Keep you from doing things like this. Alright, so Honda didn't give me a direction on the clutch, and neither did Norwood. And I ended up installing it twice the wrong way, trying to get things lined up and everything. But if you got the Honda motor, springs out. Now the next step is to make sure your motor, your clutch, is lined up with your idler pulley. And to do that, I put the belt on real quick to make sure it all looked good. Once that looks real nice and square to each other, then you go ahead and tighten your motor down. Alright, so you've got your clutch on in the right position. You got it all lined up and your motor tightened down. Next step is to get your limiter switches. This is in bag 13. So the first thing you're going to do is take these wires and shove them through the back here. And then there's two holes that line up caddy corner to your limiter switch, and they'll be real obvious. You come from the back side of the shroud, and they're threaded, so you just screw right into that. I'm putting the safety limiter switch on, and these are the bolts they provide for you, a little Allen head, and I'm tightening it down through the other side, and it just sucks right through the hole. So apparently I'm going to have to go get some washers for this, so be back in a minute. So the holes were drilled too big in this safety limiter switch slot right there in the guard, and I went and got me some washers and just put washers on all of them. But this is the mounted position. This is how you want it. So once you get them put on, you put your cover on and you listen for the click. And when you put the cover on, you hear the click, you know you have it right. So let's try this one out. Yeah. So I'd say that one's right. So the next step is to do the rest of the throttle cable. If you went ahead and did the first point, I'm not sure why you would. It would just be in your way the whole time. So we opted till now, and we're going to go ahead and get that done. So the first step is to take the air filter and housing off. Once you get the air filter housing off of it, go over here to your friction nut on your throttle arm, loosen it so you have free play. Now I had to move my clamp from over here to over here as per directions, and we want to use this hole right here. See? Right there. Right there. Alright, so now that I've got this loosened up and I've got this over here kinda in place, you want to work your lever all the way back and forth. Where the cable stop hits the casing, that's the end of your throttle. And see, it allowed it to move right there. So if this isn't right, when I pull back on the throttle arm, the throttle casing, the black stuff, the cable casing, see it moved? So it put it in the correct position to have full throttle. So make sure you tighten your clamp down on it right in that position right there. Now once you've done that, it'll run out the side This will be your left side when you're standing behind it. You loop it back through. I don't know if you can see that. And you go back underneath the engine shaft and behind the blade guards right here. And you lay it on the deck and you just shove it through. Coming out the other side, then you have your cut scale, and you just put it between the post and the cut scale. Then in the push handle, it has cable slots. You want to bring your end with the eye in it, and you want to bring it over to these attachment points. Alright, so the next step is to install your drive belt, which I've already done because when I installed the clutch, it tells you to tighten the motor and to align the idler pulley and the clutch. Well, really this next step is out of order because you should have done this next. So you need to go ahead and install the belt and make sure all three are in line now. So I think my band wheel is just a little bit towed out on this end. I know I towed it in quite a bit already, but my bolt feels like it's getting pretty loose over there, so I don't have much adjustment left. And it's hard to tell until you get the blade on it, I'm sure. And there's another adjustment there. So we're not going to really worry about it. It looks okay. It's probably not perfect. Alright, so the next thing on the list is emergency stop and rear cover safety switch connections to the engine. Now, on the Honda, you have to use the on-off switch. So we're just going to use one of the wires, and we're just going to go with the red one here. It doesn't matter either wire, just as long as one's connected to the power, one's connected to the ground. So we're going to choose the red wire on the on-off switch, and we're going to disconnect this. Alright, so now we got it disconnected. And you've got the two wires coming out of the guards, which are your limiter switches. So when you get your limiter switch wires, you notice they are very distinctly wired. And they tell you, again, it doesn't matter if you mix these up. It really doesn't matter. But since they made it so convenient, we're going to go with their convenient wiring. This is kind of what they want you to do. So all you do is take the bullet connectors here, and we're going to hook one set together, leaving you one end male and one female. And of course, they'll go straight into these connections here. So once you get your limiter switches connected, you get your on-off switch wire. And again, they've kind of made it to where the one with the spade on it is for your ground. So we'll just use this one. Now they've already got it stripped at the end just because how it was, but we're going to cut that off because we don't want that. You just pick a convenient spot to tie in. So we're going to tie in right here with the supplied connectors that Norwood gives us. So now you should be looking like this. I've got some heat shrink tubing, and I'm going to go ahead and hit all these joints with some heat shrink tubing before we put them on there. So now we got our heat shrink tubing on there. We're going to put a little dielectric grease on there. And they don't provide this. This is just my own doing here. Make sure you get the grease all around. What do you think? So what we need to do now is get ready for the next connection to the motor. Right there. And now the dielectric grease. And we're going to add it this way. And again with the heat shrink tubing. Alright, that's a good connection. When you squeeze it out the end, you know you got enough. Now we have three good, nice looking connections. So the way they've left you with the grounding situation is not really that great. You don't have much wire to go anywhere with it, and the connections they give you are really small. So Norwood provided 2 of these. I've already used one. So I'm going to clip these 2 ends off and join these 2 wires together. And then I'm going to take that remaining blue connector and then connect them to this last wire, and we'll just ground the 1 wire underneath here. That way it's not such a bulky connection and it's ground out just fine. We'll just go forward with that. Using the blue connector Norwood provided. This one is intended for a cut wire on the end. You can't shove a wire all the way through one end. We're just going to remove that. Now we can shove 2 long wires through. We'll make a good connection here. And now all we have to do is connect our ground. I've already removed the bolt. We can just stick it right in here and replace the bolt. So the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and set the blade guides in place. So the first thing you want to do is get in bag 6A and get 2 of the stainless steel set screws out. They don't tell you which bag it's in, but I figured it out. So they've already told you to assemble the shaft and the guide roller together. So it takes 15/16 to put these onto the shaft. I took them over to my workbench and put them in my vise. I mean, they're pretty soft shafts, so kind of be prepared to damage them a little bit. The vise on the bench worked really well though. Now they tell you to insert them all the way. So today we started section D, engine installation and bandwheel assembly, and we got the engine installed, the throttle cable connection, guard rubber latch assembly and guard installation, bandwheel assembly and installation, clutch assembly installation, interlocking safety switch assembly, emergency stop and rear cover safety switch connections to the engine. Alright, so we've done quite a bit today. Next video is installing the blade, tensioning it, and adjusting the band wheels. So once we have the blade installed and adjusted out, that's pretty much it. Wrapping up with motor oil and track sweeps and miscellaneous things like zip ties for our cables and the likes of that, we're done. Make sure you join in for my next video. It'll be the last one in the sawmill assembly series. It's been a long haul and I can't believe we finally got here, but man, we've got something ready to go to work with. We're ready to go to work. Well, I'm Mountain Mike, out on the mountain. Till next time.